All right, welcome back. We're going to take a look around the rest of college basketball. And I'm going to point out a few things I found interesting. Or we're going to talk about a few different conferences. We obviously hit on the Valley. I'm going to talk about 11 other conferences and just hit on them real quickly, talk about them. Then I'll get into teams I like making a run in the tournament right now that I could see being a Final Four team, Elite Eight team, things like that. Um, anyways, without further ado, the first conference I want to hit on will be the AAC, the American Athletic Conference. So this conference is pretty interesting. Obviously, you've got Houston at the top. The preseason player of the year has now opted out. I believe he's transferring, but he has opted out, but they're still rolling. They have won 5 straight. They're at 12-1, 7-1 conference. But there's 2 other teams that I think can compete with them at the top of the conference. One being former Missouri Valley team Wichita State, sitting at 8-4, 4-2 in the conference. The other being Tulsa Golden Hurricanes. Tulsa's been kind of surprising, but they're pretty good. And then I'd throw Memphis and SMU in that mix as well. I think both teams are well coached for Memphis and SMU. And I could see them, if they do happen to fall in that 4-5 game, if you get to the semifinals to play Houston, I could see them giving Houston a lot of fits. But I do think this might be a 2-bid league this year. And it looks early on like Houston's for sure getting the 1 bid. The other one, like I said, those 4 teams are going to be battling it out. And I could see whoever makes it furthest in the conference tournament will probably get that second bid. So whoever makes it to that championship game or ends up winning, let's say Houston gets upset, if somebody wins, they could get in as well. I think the Americans a sneaky good conference. I think it's a little down this year, not as deep as we've seen in recent years. Cincinnati's down. Yeah, I mean, Cincinnati's down. You've got some other teams not as great as they could be. I mean, UCF had the big win against Florida State, and then since then have kind of really faded away. And yeah, I mean, you've got some middle of the pack, but you've got Houston very good. I think the 4 teams, like I mentioned, Wichita State, Tulsa, Memphis, and SMU, are all pretty good teams. Any one of those teams could probably get an at-large bid. It's just depending on who's the hottest towards the end of the year, and probably who goes the furthest in the conference tournament. The next conference I want to take a look at is the A10. I've talked about this conference all year. I really like this conference. I still think they could get 2 to 3 teams in. SLU's been on a pause now for a month, so it's kind of concerning. Well, I think we get to see them here soon. I think this weekend they play. And get back to game action. Let me double check here real quick because they have not played since playing UMKC. They've had all their games postponed due to COVID. They actually play on Tuesday next week against Dayton. So hopefully they get back for that one. And by the time they do, they will have been over a month since they last played. So hopefully we get to see them here soon. But SLU's a very good team. I'll talk about them a little more later. SLU's a very good team. They're very experienced, well coached as well. And then out of St. Bonaventure, Richmond, and VCU, I could see 1, if not 2 of these teams getting in. I mentioned the Bonnies earlier in the year. They lost their first conference game, but they won 5 straight. The Bonnies are a very good team. They're very experienced. They've they've been building a nice program there quietly the last 5 years. Richmond, we know about them from early season hype. It's kind of faded away a little bit recently, but they're still a very good team, sitting at 9-3, 3-1 in the conference. VCU is another team too. They blew a big lead against St. Bonaventure, but they're 10-4, 3-2 in conference. They're still a very good team. Um, they played in the Bad Boy Mowers tournament earlier in the year with UNI. I believe they won 2 games in that tournament. They're a good team. They've got some quality wins on their resume. They've got some okay losses on their resume as well. I could see them, getting hot and potentially making a run for the A10 title. I think SLU's still very good. I still think SLU's the team to beat, but I'd say the Bonnies are 2, and then Richmond and VCU are 3 and 4. Like I said, I still think this league can get 2 to 3 if those 4 teams play out and have very strong ends and have very strong ends to their conference season. I really like what I've seen out of the A10 the last few years. It's a really strong conference. I think it's making a case not to really be a mid-major conference because it seems like consistently you'll get 1 or 2 teams in the Sweet 16 or making a run to the Elite 8 from that conference. So I think they're gaining more and more respect. They've got a lot of really good teams and coaches in that conference as well. Next conference I want to talk about is the ACC, which seems to be having a down year. If you look at the top right now, you got Virginia, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Pitt, kind of surprising, Georgia Tech, kind of surprising, Louisville, Duke, North Carolina, Clemson. I think the ACC is around 6 to 7 bid league this year. And I think a lot of people are looking at Virginia, looking at Virginia Tech, but Louisville, stuff like that. But I think the best team, and I think they're starting to play like the best team right now, is Florida State. I think Florida State, what Leonard Hamilton does year in and year out, doesn't get recognized enough because you do have Duke, you do have North Carolina, you've got Louisville, Virginia, Syracuse to go through every year. But I think right now, I think Florida State's starting to find their stride and they're starting to hit this switch. I think they've got a different level of playing than the rest of the ACC. If I had to guess, I think they'd be the favorite right now, in my mind at least. And I think they've got the best chance to make a deep run in March from the ACC teams. Next, we'll go to the Big 12. The Big 12 is pretty deep per usual. You eliminate Kansas State and Iowa State, and the rest are all pretty good, beating up on each other. TCU, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, who has Cade Cunningham, Oklahoma, who's quietly pretty good every year, Texas Tech, Kansas, Texas, Baylor. And listen, folks, I've seen enough of Big 12 basketball. It is a 2-team race right now. I don't care what, Big 12 fans have to say. Kansas isn't in that 2-team race. It's Texas, it's Baylor, and then it's the rest. Texas and Baylor are both better than Kansas. I think they've both beaten Kansas. Texas handily, Baylor handily, but a little fluky shot at the end to make it look closer than it actually was. Baylor really dominated them from start to finish. I think it's Baylor's conference to lose. I think they're the best team. I'll get more into depth on Baylor a little later. But I think it is Baylor and Texas, and then I think it's everybody else. I think Texas is a very good team as well. I just think Baylor's a notch ahead of them. The Big East kind of seems like a mess. UConn lost their best player, Book Knight. Um, DePaul is bad. Georgetown's bad. Seton Hall got a nice win the other day against Creighton, but they're also pretty bad. Butler's not very good. Providence, all right. Marquette's average. Xavier's got a better record than I think they actually are, but they might sneak in. Seton Hall's average team. UConn without Book Knight is a pretty average team. With Book Knight, they're a little bit better than Seton Hall. I'm still high on Nova. They've had like a month off before, but in between games, I think they'll start to hit their stride a little more, create more separation at the top of the Big East. I'm not as high on Creighton as some other people are. I think you saw it in that St. John's game. I just don't think they're as good as people think. I think this is Villanova's to lose. I think UConn could make it interesting with if Book Knight gets back. I think they could make it an interesting and make a run at Villanova, but I still think it's Villanova's conference to lose. And the rest of the conference is just average, in my opinion. It's a bit of a down year, I think, for the Big East. Next conference we'll go to is the Big Ten. In the Big Ten, they beat up on each other almost every night. It's kind of weird to see Michigan State towards the bottom. Also, to see Rutgers down there towards the bottom after winning their first three of their first four conference games, and now they've lost 5 straight. Northwestern won their first 3 conference games, and now they've lost 6 straight. So I want to say it's only going to be an 8-bid league, but I think it's going to be hard to leave out some of these teams as an at-large because of their quality wins. Because no matter who you beat in the Big Ten, it's pretty much a quality win. So I think Rutgers and Northwestern might benefit from some of those earlier wins. But I think when you look at the conference as a whole, I think the 2 best teams and 2 teams with the best chance to make a deep run in the tournament are Michigan and Iowa. Michigan plays a lot of team basketball. Dickinson the other night had one of his worst games, but they still went out there and handled it pretty easily. I think he only played like 20 minutes, and Livers picked up the slack from him. I think they're a very well balanced team, and I think that helps them a lot. Iowa, you've obviously got Luka Garza, but they can also shoot the lights out of the ball when needed. I think those 2 teams are tier 1 in the Big Ten. I then go ahead and say Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, Purdue, Ohio State, that group is probably tier 2. I think Wisconsin's just got enough experience. Illinois' got just good enough players. I'm not as high on Illinois as other people are. I think some of that buzz entering the season's kind of faded away as they've seen them play better teams and really struggle. Not struggle, but there are better teams than Illinois, and there's teams that can take advantage of Illinois. So yeah, I still think it's Michigan, Iowa. I think Michigan's the more balanced of the 2, but I'd fear Iowa more if I had them on my schedule because you got Luka Garza, but also if you focus too much on him, they can really light it up from 3. So they're kind of a scary team. They play inside-outside basketball very well. Michigan's also a very good team too. Those are the 2 teams I think are probably going to end up winning the Big Ten. Illinois or Wisconsin could have something to say about it, but I just think they're clear. Those Iowa and Michigan are clearly a notch ahead of them. Going now to Conference USA, which I think is a sneaky good mid-major conference. You got Western Kentucky. We've talked about them a lot You've got Charles Bassey, the really good player, former five-star recruit. They've also got some good guards there. They're a very experienced team. I think this is a team not to sleep on and get familiar with now because they're very good and could make some noise come March. Two other teams that are good, UAB in North Texas. UAB is the most efficient defense in the country, and they're inside the top 50, I believe, in offensive efficiency. So they're a very efficient team. They're very good. They could also make some noise if they get into the tournament. Those are the two teams I'd keep an eye on from Conference USA because if either one of those teams get into the tournament, I could easily see them pulling off an upset with the right matchup. Next, we'll go to the MAC, another mid-major conference. MAC's interesting. I think Toledo's kind of creating some separation right now from the rest of the MAC. Bowling Green's lost two straight after having a great start. I think we've saw Toledo play Bradley. They're a very good team. Got some good guard play. Like to push. I think they're the best team in the MAC, and I think they can make some noise. Akron and Bowling Green are right there with them. I just think Toledo has a better shot at making noise come March than either of those other two teams. And I think you should keep an eye on Toledo going forward. Next, we'll go to the Mountain West. This is our last mid-major conference that I want to talk about. We've obviously already talked about the Missouri Valley. Mountain West, I think, is a dogfight right now. You've got Boise State at the top, who's won 13 straight, and they're very, very impressive. I'll hit on them a little later. Utah State's 9-1. They rattled off 9 straight before losing their first game just the other day. They just lost to Colorado State last night, actually. And Colorado State, a bit of a surprise. Not really a traditional basketball school in the Mountain West. Neither is Boise, but Colorado State's having a nice year in the Mountain West at 8-2 in conference, 11-3 overall. We saw San Diego State earlier in the year beat a couple Pac-12 teams. They're still a very good team. They've had some COVID issues, they've had some injury issues, but when they're healthy, they're still a very good team. I think when you look at this conference and you look ahead to potential semifinals matchups, you could get Boise State against San Diego State, Utah State against Colorado State, and those are two very good matchups right there. I think the Mountain West deserves more love, and I think when you look at these teams, I think you could make an argument for the Mountain West to be a two-bid league this year. Boise State, again, I'll hit on them later, is a very good team. But Utah State, Colorado State, even Nevada, and San Diego State deserve some more love because those are some very solid teams as well. If you're looking to fade a team, I'll note this as well. San Jose State has been very, very bad and very bad against the spread. So if you're looking to fade a team, that's the team to fade. We'll end here with two Power Five conferences. First being the Pac-12. Again, I think the Pac-12 deserves some more love. Arizona State, for whatever reasons, 4-7 right now. They're having all kinds of problems. I think Colorado just lost to Washington, which really doesn't make sense. And this is what happens in the Pac-12 in football and basketball. They have teams that lose that shouldn't lose to certain teams. Colorado losing to an previously 0-7 Washington team is crazy. I still think this league deserves more respect. UCLA is 8-0 in conference, 12-2 overall. Oregon 9-2 overall, 4-1 in conference. Both those teams are for sure probably getting in. USC is 11-3. I think USC is going to get in. Arizona can't get in because they've self-imposed sanctions. I think Colorado deserves some more love at 11-4, and I think Stanford's a sneaky good team as well at 8-5. I think Colorado, Stanford should get some more love and consideration. So you're looking at around 4 to 5 bids from the Pac-12, and I think these teams are teams that you just don't watch enough on TV because they play so late. But I think there's 2 or 3 of these teams could really make some noise. I know Stanford's a very efficient team, so they could probably make some noise. I like what I've seen out of UCLA. Mick Cronin teams usually do well. Oregon, Dana Altman, he's created a big program there. USC's got 2 potential lottery picks, so they can make some noise. I think the Pac-12 deserves some more love, and I think they'll get some more love closer to tournament time. Last but not least, even though I think it is the worst of the Power Five, and by Power Five I mean the Power Five in football schools, the SEC, very very interesting league. Right now, Alabama is a team that I want to talk about a little more. They're pretty scary, but there's also some stats that kind of make you be a little wary of how highly you rate this team. They're 12-3, won 8 straight, 7-0 in conference. LSU is 10-3. They're a very athletic team. I like what I've seen out of LSU, even though they did just lose to Bama. Tennessee is a pretty good defensive team. I think they will rely a little too much on their defense, as we saw them get blown out by Florida. Mizzou is another team that's pretty good defensively. Offensively, they struggle to shoot from 3, so I think that's going to hurt them come tournament time eventually. I couldn't see them making that deep of a run because they can't shoot the ball very well. Outside of that, I mean, you've got Mississippi State, who's okay. You've got Florida, who's okay. Kentucky's really struggled this year. Arkansas has been up and down. I think Arkansas and Florida, outside of the top 4, probably will have the best case or best argument to make the tournament. I think you look at Kentucky right now; they've got 9 losses already. I mean, they'd almost have to win out in order to make the tournament. And you look at their schedule; it does not get any easier, folks. Big Blue Nation, they play LSU tomorrow, then travel to Tuscaloosa to play Bama. They've got Texas in the SEC Big 12 matchup. That's going to be a tough one. At Mizzou, Tennessee, Arkansas. It just doesn't get any easier for them. And, losing at Auburn, losing at Georgia, those are 2 games you got to win if you're Kentucky. And, those are teams you're supposed to beat, in my opinion. And now you've got teams that are probably supposed to beat you, and I just don't see them beating those teams the way they're playing right now. So it's a tough stretch coming up. They end on a little bit of a lighter run with Arkansas, Auburn, Vandy, Tennessee mixed in there, A&M, Florida, Ole Miss. So after this stretch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 games, they end on a little softer note, but I think they've dug themselves too deep where they can't have too many more mess ups in order to get into the tournament, especially these games against teams that are better than them. They've got to win most of them. They can't afford too many more setbacks if they want to get back into the tournament. That's an outlook at leagues I'd be watching going forward, teams I'd be watching going forward as we get ready and closer to March. Speaking of March Madness, I have compiled a list of teams that I think could make the Final Four and or make like a deep run into March Madness. So I think there's two clear favorites right now, and I think it's pretty obvious to everybody who the two clear favorites are. Gonzaga, like Gonzaga is one of the most efficient teams on offense, like we've seen in a long time. I think they're clearly one of the better teams in the country. I think it's going to be very hard for anybody to stop that offense. Baylor, on the other hand, is also a very good team. They've had a bit of a problem with COVID, but as we saw against Kansas, as we saw when they played Illinois, we've seen some other games against Texas Tech, etc., where they've stepped up and they've shown just how good they are. I think those are two teams. When it comes to March Madness, they're both probably going to be one seeds, and then you look at the brackets, you can pretty much say, hey, they're probably going to beat everybody, and pretty much pencil them in for the Final Four. I'll give you a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bigger programs that I could see also making a case for the Final Four or making a push for the Final Four. And then I'll give you two non-big programs that I think, when you look at the stats, could push for a Final Four spot. And kind of go on a little bit of a Cinderella run. I think Villanova, Iowa, Texas, Michigan, Creighton, Bama, and FSU all have a shot to make a run in March towards the Final Four. All these teams have a thing in common. They're either very efficient on offense or very efficient on defense. And I think if the one that you're very efficient at, if you could, on the opposite side of the ball, push up that efficiency a little more, play a little bit better on that side, then you can easily make a deep run. For example, when you look at Iowa, they're a very efficient offense, but not as efficient on defensive side of things. If they can tighten some things up defensively, they can make a deep run. Michigan's pretty average at both. So again, they're a very well balanced team, and I think that plays well into March. They don't really have one guy that you're going to have to lock down. They've got a multitude of guys who can score in bunches. So I think that helps them. Villanova, they've got a good front court player and a very good guard. I think that helps them out. They're also a very efficient offensive and defensive team. Uh, the thing with Villanova, though, to know is after their top two guys, I think there's a bit of more of a drop off than some of these other teams. I like a lot of what I've seen from Texas. They've got good guard play, they've got good front court play. Again, another team like Michigan, very balanced. They can beat you with a multitude of players. So I think it makes them hard to stop. Creighton, I originally wrote in this one. I actually want to take them out because similar thing to Nova. I don't think outside their top two players, they're very deep. So I'm going to take them out. I think Nova's quality as a team and Jay Wright's coaching helps them out a little more than it would on for a team like Creighton. Um, Last two teams, Bama, FSU. Again, I think Florida State is starting to hit their stride. I think you're going to see them really roll here in the last month and a half and start to look like they're supposed to. Leonard Hamilton's mentioned a couple times. He's still figuring out what to do. They've missed Scotty Barnes a couple games. I think he's coming back soon. I think when this team gets back and Leonard Hamilton figures out what's working, I think this is going to be a scary team similar to last year. Maybe not as good as last year's team. I still think they'll be very good, though. Um, yeah, Bama is a very good team. I think they're going to be a very trendy team because I do think they win the SEC either the regular season or the tournament. But the thing with Bama, I would note is I believe over 47% of their shots come from three-point land. It's hard, and they shoot pretty highly, and they can get to a lights out mode. I think it's hard for a team to shoot well enough from three when your offense relies that heavy on the three. Shoot well enough for 4 straight games in order to make a deep run. Like while what they're doing is very impressive, what how they've looked is very impressive. In order to do it 4 straight games, especially when you're going to have to go up against some better defenses, um, I think that's that's going to be a tall task for them when that many of your shots come from three. So I really like Bama. I do. I just think too many of their shots come from three. They rely a little too much on the three. Drake, Loyola, both teams that could make a deep run for mid majors talked about their offensive and defensive efficiency. If you missed that, Drake ranks fifth in offensive efficiency, 10th in defensive efficiency. Loyola ranks 15th in offensive efficiency and 13th in defensive efficiency. Why do I say this? Because typically teams that rank in the top 25 in both offensive and defensive efficiency tend to make runs in the tournament, can make upsets happen. Loyola, when they made their Final Four run, ranked in the top 15 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. They do again this year. I think this is Loyola's most talented team since that Final Four team. Drake's very good. I just think Drake's a little undersized to really compete with some of these other teams. And it'd be interesting to see if they make the tournament, which bracket they land in, because I could see them having some matchup nightmares because they do like a lot of size. Um, Two other teams outside of the valley that I want to hit on that I think could make a deep run into March are Boise State and SLU. SLU's very efficient, eighth on offensive efficiency, 18th on defensive efficiency. I think that's going to take a hit when they return because they've had a month off. And so I think it's only natural that it goes down a little bit, but I think once they find their stride again, they'll still be in the top 25 for both. They're very experienced all around in the front court and the back court. They're experienced. They don't really rely on one guy to score all their points. They've got guys coming off the bench that score 10 plus points a game. I think SLU's a very good team. I think they're a team to watch come March. Boise State's another very good team. They're very athletic, surprisingly. Ninth in offensive efficiency and 12th in defensive efficiency for them. They're somebody that can make a deep run and somebody definitely to keep an eye on. They've won 13 straight. They've got things clicking on all cylinders. They're a scary team, I think. I don't think anybody would really want to play them because they are athletic. They're long. That's not really a team you want to run into. Uh, the only other team to rank inside the top 25 for both offensive and defensive efficiency is Baylor. And that's why I still, I don't think it's Gonzaga against the field. I think it's Gonzaga and Baylor against the field because I think Gonzaga and Baylor are the two best teams far and away. I think those are the two teams to beat. Everybody else is chasing them. That's what I've got for college basketball. We've got a lot of big games this weekend. Tune in. Be back early next week, probably, to kind of recap the ending of college football and get into the off season for college football. Thanks for tuning in. Follow us on Twitter at from_knows. I've been trying to do a daily bet for college basketball given out. Been lacking a little bit the last few days, but I'll get back on that this weekend and going forward. A lot of good basketball to be played. Very excited. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys next time.